Wife cheated with her colleague at a gathering and ditched me, then utilized our stored embryo without my approval to conceive. So, I welcomed her back and now she's deserted our infant and desires no involvement with us. My spouse, 34F, and I, 42M, have been a couple for 6 years and tied the knot 2 years ago. We certainly experience our highs and lows, but overall we're content. On Thursday, she headed out with folks from her job for holiday beverages and got back around 1 a.m. completely wasted. She merely mentioned she'd enjoyed herself and headed directly to sleep. The day before, I received a note on Twitter from an unknown profile purporting to be one of her coworkers, stating she'd been chatting up all evening with one of the men from the department, 46M, and they departed together around 8 to stroll to the bus stop. The coworker had a few additional drinks, then proceeded to the stop herself, and claimed she spotted my wife strolling arm in arm with a man across the stop at roughly 9:30. They didn't notice her. The previous evening, I presented her the note and requested an account. She asserted she was so intoxicated she can't recall anything that occurred after about 7 p.m. I inquired if she ventured somewhere with a man following their exit from the group, and she reviewed the tracking data on her device which verified that they had visited a pub close to the stop for nearly 90 minutes. They reached the stop at 9:25. She handed me her device and urged I examine it, and there were no dubious texts or such. As much as I could determine, she lacks the man's contact in her device and they're not connected on Twitter or linked on LinkedIn. I questioned if she was engaging playfully with him, and she conceded that she was conversing primarily to him throughout the night. But that's solely because he's the sole individual in her department she shares interests with, and that they're simply pals and it wasn't playful engagement. She's referenced this man to me previously and noted how much they share. I inquired if they were linking arms and she said she doesn't recall, but she doubts it. She purports to know who dispatched me the note and states it's a lady in the department who despises her, though she doesn't understand why. This morning, she's been in an awful temper and we've hardly communicated. So, that's our status. I'm uncertain how to proceed. Is this as major a warning sign as it appears? Update 1. Several folks asked for an update to my prior entry, and much has transpired in the past 10 days. So, here it is. I'll share any additional updates on my account. Lisa returned from her shift on Tuesday and nonchalantly mentioned that she'd chatted with the guy Mark, and he'd affirmed that they hadn't linked arms. They'd just been strolling side by side because she was tipsy and in stilettos. I questioned why her colleague Julia would create a Twitter profile, locate me, and messaged me claiming they linked arms if it wasn't accurate. She said Julia is essentially infatuated with Mark and attempted a move on him right after his separation, but he turned her down. I asked why Julia would perceive a threat from her. She said because her and Mark are buddies, and Julia's a deranged envious, as shown by the Twitter note. I asked why she went for a beverage, just her and Mark. She said that per Mark, they passed this pub with a fantastic DJ spinning, so they popped in for a drink. Her sole remorse was consuming too many cocktails too soon and becoming plastered. The following day, she went browsing after her shift and returned with a new outfit. I asked what the event was, and she said her job holiday bash. Last week was merely drinks with folks from her department. The firm holiday bash is on Saturday. Evidently, she'd brought it up. I barely rested that night. The subsequent day, I chose to respond to the Twitter note to obtain more details. I asked, "Do you believe anything's occurring with them?" Julia, I presume, swiftly responded with a lengthy note saying that they banter at work and everybody's observed. Evidently, Lisa was set to be dismissed, but Mark vouched for her, so she retained her position. Mark shields her in the department and will repeatedly support her. She also said that Lisa gripes about me to the entire department, and it's evident we lack a joyful union. I asked if she was attending the holiday bash, and she said she was. She said she'd inform me if anything occurred. Lisa ended her shift early on Saturday, so she had time to prepare. She appeared stunning, and I truly didn't want her to attend, but I felt like I couldn't voice it. I got a Twitter note around 1 a.m. saying that Lisa and Mark hadn't mingled at the bash, but that people from the department had opted to depart and head to a different lounge. They all departed just prior to 10 o'clock and were at the new lounge by 9. Lisa and Mark appeared just prior to 1 a.m. Lisa got home about 3 a.m., not quite as intoxicated as before, and went straight to slumber. I feigned being deeply asleep. I examined the tracking data on her device. After departing the site, she'd taken a 4-mile detour to a suburban avenue, lingered for 45 minutes, then proceeded to the lounge. I forwarded the address to Julia. She didn't respond until the next morning when she said it was Mark's residence. When Lisa awoke, I just questioned her outright if she betrayed me with Mark last night. She furiously refuted it. I informed her that I knew she'd visited Mark's residence. She charged me with monitoring her, labeled me domineering, said she was heading to reside with her aunt. I insisted on an account, and she said she visited his residence so they could share a beer before going to the lounge. Then she rushed out. She wouldn't respond to my notes or pick up my calls all day Monday. I phoned her aunt, who said she hadn't encountered her, but she messaged me later that she'd conversed with Lisa and she was fine. Lisa returned home the day before yesterday. I asked where she'd been and she just said she couldn't continue this and desires a separation. She began gathering some garments while I attempted to get her to converse with me. I asked if she was abandoning me for Mark. She again denied anything improper had transpired between them, but said my envy was the ultimate trigger. It's obvious I don't believe her. I'm domineering. I undervalue her. She's profoundly miserable. Has been for some time, so she's departed. It seems like I'll be spending my first Easter solitary. I have no clue if she was honest or if it was a liaison. Strangely, I'm not feeling too awful today, so perhaps this is for the better. Update 2. Once she was gone, Lisa blocked me on all her online platforms and declined to reply to my notes or accept my calls. I wound up journeying to the opposite end of the nation to spend Easter with my siblings. On Easter Sunday, Lisa came home and grabbed more of her belongings. I observed her on our surveillance system. I attempted calling her, but she disregarded my calls. Easter wasn't wonderful, and my siblings were both astonished and rejecting about what had occurred. They had no notion we were facing problems and maintained Lisa would regain her composure and return. Eventually, I just said she'd encountered someone else. I came back home on the 29th. I'd been receiving occasional reports from Lisa's aunt just informing me she's okay, but without any specifics. Before all this transpired, we'd arranged to spend Independence Day at Lisa's preferred cafe in the town. I went solo, but she didn't appear. On Wednesday evening, I got a Twitter note from Julia saying that Lisa and Mark had shown up at work together in Mark's vehicle. I didn't trouble responding. On Thursday evening, she dispatched another note saying Lisa was tarnishing the department against her and that Mark was urging her supervisors to relocate her to another branch or eliminate her. She implored me to intervene. I messaged Lisa and said we needed to discuss, but she didn't respond. So, the following day, I dialed her job reception, provided a false identity, and got connected. I could sense she wasn't pleased to hear my voice, but she consented to rendezvous after her shift at a nearby cafe and converse. I arrived early and she showed up 35 minutes tardy. She expressed regret for ignoring my calls and said she still values me and wants to conclude things amicably. I said, "Just reveal the truth." She vowed that she wasn't engaging in a liaison with Mark and they were just pals. She admitted that they converse a lot in the department, but maintained it wasn't an emotional liaison. She comprehends why I was doubtful after the Twitter note, but said I should have embraced her refusal and relied on her. She has numerous male pals, but she felt like she couldn't socialize with them because I'd become envious. I highlighted that I've never instructed her not to socialize with anyone, but she said I'd be sullen whenever she'd socialize with a male pal. She feels like we only wed to attempt to mend a bond that was already fractured. Our dialogues have deteriorated into trivial chat and we've grown distant. I said I'd learned that she and Mark arrived at work together. Lisa said she visited Mark's after I charged her with betrayal and knew it was finished between us. They spent the holiday together and concurred that they'd form a superior pair than we did. She required me to learn that nothing transpired between them until after she informed me she desired a separation. And now they were a couple and she wanted me to hear it from her before I viewed it on online platforms. Mark was waiting outdoors for her in the vehicle. All I could do was rise and exit. Lisa messaged me saying she knew I was distressed, but not to commit anything foolish. I blocked her contact. I'm not going to deceive, it was a tough evening. The next day, I was just desensitized. Didn't really accomplish much. Over the weekend, I retrieved our wedding documents so I can initiate separation proceedings. I've no notion what to convey to Julia, so I haven't responded. I think the strategy now is to attempt to secure a new position nearer to my birthplace. I relocated across the nation to reside with Lisa, and I've never truly felt established here. I also don't want to encounter her and Mark around the area. Fortunately, we lease. This will likely be my final update unless something extraordinary occurs. So, thanks for perusing. Update 3. My soon-to-be former spouse is expecting and has implied to her acquaintance that it's mine. The only manner this is feasible is if she's had our last stored embryo inserted without my authorization. If that's what she's executed, then either the fertility center haven't requested my approval or she's somehow persuaded them that I've provided permission. When I departed our joint residence in February, I couldn't locate my driver's license, so it's probable she possesses it. I'm awaiting a response from the center, but I'm panicking and want to gain an understanding of the possible repercussions. Could she face incarceration? What will occur to the center? What transpires when the infant arrives given the conditions? We're in Scotland. Thanks. Edit. I eventually conversed with the center director, and it appears this is all due to my own foolishness. When our final embryo failed, we executed all the documents a couple months later to perform the ultimate insertion. My spouse then encountered some endocrine problems, so we halted the procedure until she could resolve it. Then, for assorted causes, we resolved not to continue with the insertion, which she informed the center. Evidently, they just suspended the procedure for up to 4 years to safeguard our payment, and the approval documents stayed effective. My spouse had the insertion 8 weeks ago. Update 4. My former spouse is expecting our initial offspring due on New Year's Day. There's more detail in my account, but basically we separated last Easter and I relocated back with my guardians 300+ kilometers away. She initiated a romance with a colleague which generated so much turmoil at her job that in March she achieved a joint accord that she would promptly quit in exchange for 9 months' compensation. The romance concluded and she employed the compensation funds to recommence the fertility procedure we'd halted years prior. When I discovered she was expecting, I reached out to the fertility center who clarified that the agreements we'd executed at the commencement of the procedure were still effective and they hadn't committed any error. I disagreed and thanks to the guidance/suggestions, I engaged lawyers specializing in medical malpractice and agreement law. They succeeded in arranging a compensation with the center instead of judicial action, and my former and I ended up with about £120,000 each after charges. Plus, the center revised their procedures to mandate approval be reaffirmed by both individuals before any embryo insertion occurs. For the past 5 months, I've been in consistent communication with my former, deliberating compensation discussions and journeying up north for examinations. When I inquired why she did it, she just said that she knew this was her final opportunity to have an infant. And when she acquired some funds, she interpreted it as an indication that she should proceed with the embryo insertion before I recalled to revoke approval. She's since been identified with schizophrenia, which in her view has exonerated her of any accountability for her behaviors. She's eager for us to reunite and nurture our daughter as a unit. I'm not keen on being a duo, but I clearly don't want to be 300 kilometers distant from my daughter. I've secured a new position, so I truly didn't want to relocate back up to Northumberland, but she was prepared to relocate down to Cornwall as long as we cohabit. So, we concurred to expend the compensation funds on a property in my birthplace. I collected the keys 2 weeks ago and I've been equipping/renovating in readiness for us relocating next month. My former has no acquaintances or relatives nearby and no employment. Us cohabiting is going to be extremely uncomfortable, but once the infant arrives, I'm optimistic we can establish a joint nurturing pattern. The new property has 4 bedrooms, so we'll have 1 apiece and 1 for our daughter. We've concurred not to date others for at least 4 years, her stipulation. What's the optimal approach to manage this scenario? We're both highly thrilled to be guardians, and I hope I'm optimizing a dreadful scenario, but it's clearly laden with potential hazards. I don't envision us reviving a romantic bond, but in a perfect scenario, we'll cohabit for a few years, then dispose of the property, by which juncture she'll be established here, and we can reside nearby each other and jointly nurture our daughter. I hope I'm not being incredibly gullible and committing a massive error. My guardians are thrilled to be grandparents, but they're not enthusiastic about the notion of us cohabiting. Update 5. To say my prior entry received a pessimistic reaction would be an understatement. It was an odd sensation reading all the responses declaring what a blunder I was committing after investing so much contemplation and expending plenty of time and effort to reach where I was. Someone forwarded me a recording of my earlier entries. Hearing the most difficult period of my existence being narrated aloud truly impacted me and evoked a lot of sentiments of remorse and embarrassment. It made me recognize that I hadn't even started to digest what transpired last Easter or why. And I reached out to a counselor the subsequent day. Lisa relocated the day prior to my initial session. It was uneasy, but she was occupied arranging her new space, so I just allowed her to proceed. That evening, we requested sushi and viewed a series. It was pleasant. I encountered the counselor the next day and described the circumstance. He believed the entire affair was a poor concept, but as we were now cohabiting, he consented to assist us handle matters as seamlessly as feasible. He believed duo counseling would be the superior choice. Lisa and I have consulted him every week since then and reviewed our whole bond. After 5 stillbirths, the final 3 at 14+ weeks utterly devastated Lisa's psychological well-being. I began waning on the notion of persisting to attempt for an offspring. Instead of discussing with Lisa, she so urgently desired to be a parent, I thought it would shatter her. I just withdrew from her. Of course, she observed and faulted herself and commenced deteriorating. Pair this with unidentified schizophrenia and the glandular problems which stemmed from the fertility treatment, and it was a formula for catastrophe. Lisa thought, possibly accurately, that I desired out of the bond, but was too timid to declare it. So, I just disengaged and awaited for her to tire of me. The entire Mark scenario was the trigger that shattered the bond, and she ceased striving for our union and permitted me to exit without remorse. In counseling, I've learned to embrace my accountability for the dissolution of our union. I wasn't a fine spouse toward the conclusion, and it's a wonder Lisa remained as long as she did. The period separated made me comprehend how much I still adore her. We've concurred to attempt and accept what's transpired and be grateful it led us to where we are now. Hopefully, we've both acquired insights that will fortify our bond. I know I have. So, we're now back residing as a duo. I halted the separation, which was dragging on as Lisa declined to participate in it. Our daughter was born on November 22nd, 2 weeks sooner than anticipated, and she's utterly flawless. I'm cradling her as I compose this. I know a lot of folks who perused my earlier entries will be let down with how I've managed this, but at the end of the day, we've only got one shot at existence, and I honestly can't conceive of a superior way to expend mine. Thanks for all your guidance over the past year, and happy holidays. Comments where Op has replied. Comment 1, dude, don't ignore the Mark scenario. Did Julia forfeit her position because of them? Oop, no. Lisa forfeited her position and Julia remained. Mark didn't intervene to rescue Lisa, which triggered a massive dispute and resulted in them separating. Mark relocated to a new firm a few months afterward. Comment 2. Oh, poor fellow. You permitted yourself to be coerced into accepting her back. This was why individuals advised you cohabiting was a poor concept. Didn't it ever dawn on you that her conceiving with your offspring without your consent is another coercion method? Then this sob narrative. You succumbed to it. Completely. Oop. Yes, that did dawn on me, but keep in mind, we've been attempting for an offspring for 4 years. 3 rounds of fertility treatment and 5 embryo insertions leading to stillbirth. The sole reason we didn't pursue the 6th insertion was the burden it was imposing on Lisa's psychological/bodily health. She genuinely believed this was her final opportunity at having an infant and that I was going to revoke consent. To me, that's excusable, but of course, I comprehend your perspective. Update 6. My spouse delivered our daughter in November. She endures from unmanaged schizophrenia, and after the holidays, she developed acute postnatal anxiety. We concurred that she'd go and reside with her dad for a fortnight as she was deteriorating and required a respite. She never returned and we're no longer in immediate communication. Our final dialogue was over 2 months ago and it didn't proceed well. She evidently has no curiosity in being in our daughter's existence or even receiving reports on her. As far as I know, she's still residing with her dad 300+ kilometers away. I've been presented a temporary assignment at my firm's Norwegian branch covering parental leave for 18 months. I want to accept it, but I don't want to inform my spouse as she would probably attempt to disrupt the plans. I possess my daughter's travel document and original registration certificate. Can I just depart without informing her? We also possess a property together, which I'd like to lease out while I'm absent. If she appears unexpectedly and discovers someone else residing here, could she intervene? There's no loan and all the expenses are in my name, but she's on the title. To be explicit, if she ever resolves to unblock me and desires to visit our daughter, then of course we'd return. I'm not seeking to remove her from her permanently, but I think this would be beneficial for us.